The Library of Demons. They called it the Atramentum Library, though no maps marked its location. It existed as a whispered rumor among scholars and occultists, a place older than recorded history, where forbidden knowledge rested, waiting to be claimed. For most of my life, it had been nothing more than a myth, a tantalizing story passed from one eager seeker to the next. But then the letter arrived. It was written on brittle parchment, the ink dark and glossy, as though it had never dried. There were no pleasantries, no signature, only a single line, written in precise, angular script. Come to the Atramentum Library. You have been chosen. The letter contained no address, but I knew where to go. I couldn't explain how. The knowledge was simply there in my mind, like a memory I hadn't known I'd forgotten. I left that same night, abandoning the warmth of my study for the cold, fog-drenched streets. The library stood at the edge of a forest, its silhouette towering against the moonless sky. It wasn't like any building I'd ever seen. Its architecture was jagged, unnatural, as though it had been carved from a single block of black stone by a hand that did not care for symmetry or reason. Its doors were enormous, carved with symbols I couldn't read but felt deep in my gut, like sharp claws raking across my mind. As I stepped inside, the air grew cold and heavy, pressing against my skin like a damp shroud. The library was vast, endless. The shelves stretched up into the darkness, higher than any cathedral ceiling. Books crammed every inch of space, some ancient, their pages crumbling with age, others sleek and pristine, their spines glowing faintly as though they were alive. The smell of paper and ink mingled with something fouler, the metallic tang of blood, the acrid scent of burnt hair. But it wasn't silent. Whispers drifted through the air, faint but constant, like 1,000 voices murmuring in languages I couldn't understand. I stopped in my tracks, my breath catching. The whispers weren't coming from the shadows. They were coming from the books. The first book I touched burned me. It was small, bound in what looked like cracked leather, its title unreadable. The moment my fingers brushed the cover, heat shot through me, searing my skin and sending a wave of nausea rolling through my stomach. I jerked my hand back, stumbling. The book opened itself, its pages fluttering as though caught in an invisible wind. Words began to write themselves across the parchment, black ink spreading like blood through water. You are not ready. The book slammed shut, the force of it knocking me backward. I gasped, cradling my hand. The skin was unmarked, but it still throbbed as though burned. That was when I noticed the shadows. They moved between the shelves, not like people, but like things crawling on too many limbs. They were slow, deliberate, and watching me. I pressed forward, deeper into the library, drawn by something I couldn't name. The deeper I went, the stranger the books became. One was bound in something that looked alarmingly like human skin, its surface tattooed with symbols that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. When I touched it again, same thing happened. I burned my finger. Some books didn't even have covers. They writhed on the shelves like living things, their pages curling and uncurling, whispering secrets to one another in voices too quiet to hear. But one book called to me. It sat alone on a pedestal in the center of a circular room, its cover blacker than the shadows around it. As I approached, the whispers grew louder, forming words I could almost understand. The title burned itself into my mind before I even opened it. The Secret Book of Atramentum. I reached out, my hand trembling. The moment I touched the cover, the library changed. The shelves groaned, their wood twisting and splintering. The whispers turned to screams, shrill and panicked, echoing through the endless halls. The shadows surged forward, slamming into me, and I realized too late that they weren't shadows at all. They were demons. I don't know how I survived. One moment, the shadows were clawing at me, their hands tearing at my flesh, and the next, I was standing in a new room, vast, circular, and empty, except for a single figure. It sat on a throne of bone and books, its body cloaked in tattered robes that seemed to shift and ripple like smoke. Its face was hidden, but I could feel its eyes on me, burning holes into my soul. It spoke without moving, its voice deep and echoing. You seek knowledge, mortal, but knowledge has a price. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice stolen by fear. The figure rose, towering over me, its form impossibly large. It gestured to the secret book in my hands. You have chosen the book, now the book chooses you. The pages of the secret book began to turn, faster and faster, the air around me filling with the sound of tearing flesh and breaking bones. Words I couldn't understand burned themselves into my skin, their heat searing me to the core. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the library. When I woke, the library was silent. The book lay open beside me, its pages blank and still. My body ached, my hands trembling as I tried to push myself up. Every nerve in me screamed, as if I'd been hollowed out and left raw. But something was wrong. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were louder now, clearer, and they weren't coming from the books anymore. They were coming from inside me. I froze, my chest tightening as I realized the truth. The keeper's voice echoed in my mind, calm and cold. "You are the book now, a vessel for knowledge, a doorway to the abyss." I stumbled to my feet, the whispers pressing against my soul, desperate and endless. I could feel the weight of the library itself shifting around me, its walls groaning as the shadows closed in. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because something else had taken root inside me, something dark, something hungry. I didn't walk toward the door, I was pulled. The entrance to the library was different now. Where before there had been massive carved doors, there was now only an archway of jagged stone, framing an endless void. And through that void, I could see the world outside. I stepped forward, the air crackling around me, and the whispers inside my head rose to a deafening roar. My hands burned, and when I looked down, I saw words scrawling themselves across my skin, endless, twisting lines of ink that moved and shifted like living things. The keeper's voice spoke again, soft and patient. "You will return to the world, but you will not leave this library. You carry it now. You are its herald, its seed. Wherever you go, the library will follow." I tried to resist, tried to fight it, but it was too late. The void pulled me in, and when I opened my eyes again, I was standing in my study room. At first, I thought I had escaped. The familiar comfort of my bookshelves and desk greeted me, the moonlight streaming through the window. Everything looked the same as I had left it, but then I saw the shadows. They writhed along the edges of the room, moving in and out of the bookshelves, stretching toward me like hungry fingers. The air smelled of old blood and burnt hair. And when I turned to the mirror on the wall, I didn't see my own reflection. I saw shelves, endless shelves, stretching into darkness, their books alive and breathing. I saw myself walking those aisles, bound in shadows, and I realized the truth. The library wasn't just following me, it was inside me. I didn't leave the house for weeks. The whispers never stopped, and every night I found myself writing, pages and pages of words I didn't understand, scrawled in ink that bled from my fingertips. And then the letter came. It was on the same brittle parchment, the ink dark and glossy, and it was written in that same angular script. "Come to the Atramentum Library. You have been chosen." But this time, the letter wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my neighbor. I stood at my window watching as she read it, a young woman in her 20s, her face lighting up with curiosity. She tucked the letter into her coat and glanced toward my house, her eyes meeting mine. I didn't wave. I couldn't, because I knew what would happen next. She would go. She would enter the library, and I would feel it growing stronger. And when she came back, she would carry the same curse. The library wasn't just a place. It was a hunger, spreading like a disease. And I was part of it now. I'm the first step, the invitation, the bait. The library would always need new readers, and I would always be there to welcome them. Days turned into weeks, and the library's grip on me only grew stronger. At first, the changes were small. Shadows lingered in the corners of my vision, even in broad daylight. I could hear the books whispering to me, their voices weaving through my thoughts like threads in a loom. Sleep became a distant memory. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw its aisles, endless, twisting, alive. Then, the physical changes began. The ink didn't stay on my skin. It spread. Dark lines snaked up my arms and over my chest, forming symbols I couldn't read but somehow understood. They burned when I touched them, a reminder of the knowledge now trapped inside me. I couldn't leave the house anymore. Not really. Every time I stepped outside, the world felt thinner, like the ground beneath me wasn't real, like I was walking on the surface of a dream, and the library was the reality waiting to swallow me whole. I wasn't a man anymore. I was a doorway. The young woman returned 3 days later. I heard her footsteps first, slow and hesitant, echoing through the empty street. She looked different now, her face pale, her eyes wide and glassy. And the whispers, I could hear them coming from her too. She knocked on my door, her hand trembling. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to face what I had done, but my body wasn't mine anymore. I opened the door, her gaze snapped to mine, and for a moment, she didn't speak. Then she stepped inside, her voice barely a whisper. "You knew, didn't you? You knew what it would do to me." My voice faltered. There were no words I could say to make her understand. She raised her hands and I saw the ink spreading across her skin, just like mine. What happens to us now? I wanted to tell her the truth, that the library wasn't finished with us, that we were its heralds, its servants. But before I could speak, she crumpled to the floor, her body writhing as the ink consumed her. The library was claiming her. The next letter came a week later, then another. I watched from my window as they were delivered to homes across the city. I recognized the hunger in their eyes as they opened them. That same curiosity that had led me to my own ruin. One by one, they disappeared. And one by one, they came back, changed. The city itself began to feel different. Shadows stretched longer than they should, twisting across the ground like living things. The air grew heavier, colder, as though the library's presence was leaking into the world. And then there were the books. They started appearing in places they didn't belong. On park benches, in coffee shops, on subway seats. Each one carried the same whispers, the same promises of forbidden knowledge. And every time someone touched one, I felt the library's power surge inside me, growing stronger. It wasn't just the books or the people. The city itself was changing. One night, I wandered the streets, trying to understand what was happening. I turned a corner and found myself standing in a place that shouldn't exist. A street lined with shelves, stretching into the darkness. The books on those shelves glowed faintly, their titles written in a language I couldn't read. I stepped closer, my heart pounding, and a voice whispered from behind me, "You're spreading it." I turned to see the young woman, her face now hollow and her eyes sunken. She smiled, though it was a joyless thing, her teeth sharp and stained with ink. "This is how it begins," she said. "The library isn't just a place anymore. It's becoming everything." The realization hit me like a blow. The library wasn't satisfied with taking people one by one. It was growing, consuming, expanding its reach. Soon, the whole city would become part of it and rule by the whispers of the books and the will of the keeper. And I was its key. Every person I touched, every book I wrote, every letter I sent, all of it was spreading the library's influence. I wanted to stop. I wanted to scream, to fight, to burn every book I could find. But the library wouldn't let me, because deep down, a part of me didn't want to stop. The last time I saw my reflection, I didn't recognize myself. My face was gone, replaced by swirling ink and shifting words. My body wasn't flesh anymore. It was paper and shadow, hollow and endless. And yet, I felt complete. The library had taken everything from me, but it had given me something too. Purpose. Last night, I wrote a new letter. My hand moved on its own, scrawling the words with ink that seemed to bleed from my fingers. When it was done, I sealed it and left it on the doorstep of a man down the street. I don't know his name. I don't need to. He'll find his way. They always do. And soon, he'll join us. The library is coming, and nothing can stop it. Well, that was pretty much it. I hope you liked the story till then. Bye-bye.